and then we'll start the class instead of waiting usually, which we do for 5 minutes. Because anyway, I'm taking the attendance from the Zoom logs, so that will be fine. So we'll start this session just at 1:31, and we'll start the session, and we'll go back to today. We hope to finish the at least the jurisprudence part. Okay, the jurisprudence part, but again, don't feel pressured by my my desire to finish the jurisprudence part. You should feel free to ask any questions at any point of time. Right. Okay. Okay. So folks in room number 103A, guys, you have to make sure that there's no noise coming through, because otherwise I'll just put you on mute. And then because we don't want any sound coming through. So let's quickly go through our material. And once again, I would request everyone to make an extra effort and concentrate, because it may sometimes feel, in order to have efficient coverage of maximum amount of concepts, maximum number of concepts, we are going in this lecture tutorial fashion rather than a seminar style teaching, method. So therefore, it may seem a little bit boring, but the way you have to approach it is to tell yourself that this is what our law teacher has decided that we should learn. So we have to master these concepts, and so let's listen attentively to what he's saying, try to understand the concepts, and otherwise, if we don't, then we ask questions. Make sure we grasp all these concepts, okay? So that is how you should approach it. And so you have to, it can get a little boring, but you have to guard against, losing interest, because your duty is to focus and learn these concepts. Okay. So I think yesterday we were here, we had just about started normative versus positive, okay? So we have a total of, I think, almost 13 distinctions, which are there, which we have here. So a total of 13 distinctions, and we will go through all of them, and these are actually essentially very similar to each other, okay? So that's why we have listed them together. And the reason I discuss them together, as you see, that I feel that this is how the brain recalls information. And if you study all the related concepts together, later on when you're trying to recall something, it becomes a little easier to recall that, because there are so many interconnected concepts that one or the other idea is floating around near the top of your awareness, and then it pulls up all the other related ideas as well when you recall that. So this is just an idea that I have. Based on that, I try to make sure we cover all the related points, okay? So first we start with normative versus positive. Okay, so we had some kind of glimpse of it the other day, briefly. And this discussion, I think we can put somewhere else, actually. I think I told you this. So we can actually put it outside this normative positive, which is a slightly different point, okay? 1 minute. So what I've not done, I think, is I've not shared the screen. Share screen. Yeah. Right. You're able to see the notes now, everyone? In the classroom?
Yes, sir.
You're able to see the notes, and everywhere else is okay. Great. Excellent. Okay, so yeah, actually, I had forgotten in my rush to start the class. I had forgotten to talk about to share the screen. Okay, so please remember, when you see me, I continue to talk, and that I haven't shared the screen. Please remind me. Okay. So the first point we want to discuss in detail is the first distinction, which is normative versus positive. Okay, as you will see, normative, essentially, if you see in this discussion, normative is about a statement about what should be. Okay, so if I say that people should not smoke, now that's a statement about that's a normative statement, because I feel that this is how things ought to be, that people should not smoke. So that's a normative statement. But if I say something like here, for instance, the moon is grade of green cheese, or if I say that it's kind of hot in here, that's a positive statement, because I'm describing a state of affairs. Okay, So it could be subjective. It could so hot is a subjective word, and this state it could be incorrect. But if it's a statement about what is, that would be considered as a positive statement. So positive versus normative. Okay, this debate is important. There are many similar ideas. So I've given you a video as well of this professor, where you can get a slightly more expanded perspective of this idea. So please read that. But essentially, this distinction is one of our first important distinctions, and I think maybe we discussed yesterday about the reservation topic. So all these are basically what is called affirmative action, and all policy essentially is all policy debates are normative. Okay, and so if you can't have most of the economic policy debates are normative, because they're based on what should be done or what should not be done. They're based on these subjective views. Okay, and we had this discussion also. I think that we had the discussion of this debate on abortion. This is also a normative debate, because you can't really prove that one side is wrong or one side is right. Okay, and in contrast to the normative debate, I've given an example of a positive debate, where if you're arguing about the distance between two places, and if you agree with what a kilometer is, okay, this is an important point to understand, that this is not, this is only a positive debate, because we assume this is kind of so obvious that you have to assume that there's another built-in assumption here. It's called a suppressed premise, that both of us agree on what a kilometer is. Now, if I want to create a problem here, now I can say, well, I don't agree with your definition of a kilometer. So that will become a further problem. Okay, so here we have to assume that when you look at the structure of the sentence, this is a positive debate, provided the parties agree on what a kilometer is. Okay, so, and actually that also is a positive question, because in Paris, there is actually something called a meter bar. So kilometer is 1,000 meters, and what is a meter? A meter is, there is actually a bar in Paris. It's called the meter bar, and that the length of that is actually a meter. If you ever have a debate with someone about what a meter is, how long a meter is, you can go to the meter bar in Paris and settle your debate. Okay, but these are basically, as you can understand, these are positive debates about positive questions. All right. So basically, this and I think I gave you the hint yesterday as well, that you want to be very careful, because all of us get involved in debates with our relatives, with our friends, in college, in a policy setting, policy debate setting. So sometimes you have to be aware of whether or not you should try to analyze what the debate is about, and try to think about whether this is a debate about a positive question, or is it a debate about a normative issue, like whether we should have a reservation. Okay, reservation of jobs, college seats, etc., affirmative action. Now, there is no end to this debate, whether you should have it or you should not have it. There is no end to this debate. You can never solve this debate, because you can never solve this dispute, because it is based on fundamental differences of value systems, let's say. So you have some people have value systems which say that people who have been historically discriminated against, the government's role is to give them a leg up, etc. So they support this, and the other people don't. So these kind of things are all based on normative preferences. So you cannot ever settle these debates. So my advice to students is, when you are involved in a debate, please try to understand if it's not a value-neutral debate. That is, it's a value-laden debate, which means it's like a reservation and things like that. Okay, or should people be allowed to smoke? Okay, these are all normative preference-laden debates, and these things, they have no end. So my advice to students is, don't waste your time endlessly participating in these debates, because you know that these things you can argue till the cows come home, and there's never going to be any solution. Okay, so don't waste your time on these debates. Once you have understood that a debate is not value-neutral, okay, value system. Okay, you have a conservative value system or a liberal value system. So value neutral, it's not value neutral. Okay, that means it's depending on your value system. So these things have no end. Okay, so we have taken this to be, so this is our first statement. Now, in 4A, I've taken this little bit of a detour here. We are going into, you can read that note about economics as a science, and science. But the main thing is the discussion of science, okay? So science in general, okay? So what is science nowadays, as we know? We have people in COVID and climate change, people are throwing around the word science a lot. like follow the science and all that. So what is actually science, and what should be our standard for evaluating a scientific statement? If he's claiming to be scientific, then the statement that he's making, is it a scientific statement according to the Karl Popper standard, which is a very important standard which many people accept. Okay. So what Karl Popper said here is basically, if you see this, we can open this thing. So he talked about science as proceeding. I think this is kind of where we stopped the other day. All right. So how much have I taken? About 5 minutes I've taken, or 10 minutes I've taken to kind of repeat everything we did the other day. All right. So what Popper said was, he was actually what is called a philosopher of science. If you are interested in the philosophy of science, it's actually a topic by itself, and there's some interesting lectures on YouTube as well. There's a there are some lecture series on that. Very, very fascinating topic, philosophy of science. And so Popper is one of those philosophers of science, and he talked about scientific knowledge as growing as a process of conjecture and refutation. Conjecture and refutation means in the sense that I will come up with a hypothesis, which is a conjecture. So I will say that the earth is flat. Okay, so when I say the earth is flat, then Ankit will say, no, I don't think the earth is flat, and I will do some experiments and prove to you that the earth is not flat. So he will disprove my theory. He will disprove my theory about, or my conjecture or my hypothesis about the earth being flat. So what Popper is saying is that the growth of scientific knowledge is happening through this process. People make conjectures, and then some people try to refute them. Okay, so basically here you see that they've talked about. You should read this whole section actually. He's talked about this idea of. If you want to find out where he's talked about falsifiable. Okay, one second. Let me try, because this is actually the word. Okay, so he has not used the word falsification, but it's basically he's talked about testing. But essentially, the key word in Popper's theory is falsification. So if I make a statement, if it's a statement, is to be considered a scientific statement. So don't let just anybody fool you by saying, okay, follow the science, because this is what the science says. Now, whatever the science says, if you accept the Popper definition of science, that statement must be falsifiable. Okay, it must be such that, say, for instance, this kind of statement. If I make a statement like this, the sun did not rise before 6:30 a.m. in Delhi today. Okay, now this is a scientific statement because it is falsifiable. Because you can actually go to the Met Office website and find out whether what time the sun actually rose in Delhi today, and you will figure out that this statement is either wrong or right. I don't know what it is actually, but it could be. But the point is, from the structure of the statement, you can figure out that the statement is falsifiable. Okay, so this is the important point here. Whereas if I make another statement which is of this type, that it is warm in here, okay, this is not a falsifiable statement because warm is subjective. Okay, so what is warm? Somebody can say, if they've been used to living in Kuwait, they'll say, 35, 38 Celsius is also not warm. On the other hand, somebody could say that, even 16, 20 Celsius is warm. So what is warm? Warm is subjective. So this you can never prove. If I say it is warm in here, you can never prove me wrong, because even if you say, show me that the temperature is only 6 degrees Celsius, I'll say that, no, for me, that's warm. So therefore, you can't ever prove me wrong here. So this is what is called. So you have to be very careful here. Remember this standard. It's a very important standard. Okay, it's just not something that I cooked up. It's well established in the history of the philosophy of science. And so the Karl Popper standard of falsifiability. Okay, a scientific statement has the property of falsifiability. Yes, Sushant?
Sorry, I did not get this point. How can a scientific statement be falsified? Isn't science something which cannot be questioned?
No. Actually, so there are many ways to think about science. The way that Popper thought about science is as a process of, as you can see here, he's saying the growth of scientific knowledge is happening through this process of conjecture and refutation. As I explained to you, that I'll come up with a theory that the earth is flat. and then Ankit will do some experiments and prove that my theory is not correct. And he will cite some evidence, okay? He will show that ships are disappearing over the horizon and things like that. And then he will prove that the Earth is not flat. So my conjecture about the flat Earth being flat is refuted by Ankit's logic or by his experiments. Okay. So therefore, what Popper is saying is that if that is the way it should be done, if your statement has to be, can be, should be able to capable of being refuted, so the statement must be falsifiable. Okay. So I understand why you're a little bit confused, because that is what the media has told you, that science, you should accept the science. But we're not talking about science per se. Okay. We are talking about what is the nature. If somebody is trying to convince you that this is what the science is saying, what you should tell them is, what are you actually saying? Are you saying that something like this, or are you saying something like this? Because it is accepted for many people in the world accept this Karl Popper theory of science, that is scientific. If in order to be scientific, a statement must be falsifiable. It must be falsifiable means it must be capable of being false. So we are talking in a more general sense about scientific statements. It's not about just science like chemistry or physics or whatever. We are talking about the nature of a scientific statement. Okay, so if we are saying that, even if you look at global warming, etc., those kind of theories, okay, so if you apply this Karl Popper standard, what you would say, so what they are saying is that, man-made global warming and things like that. So if you apply the Karl Popper standard, I don't understand the theory very. I'm not a science person, okay, but it's something like this, I guess, something like this, okay. But if you apply the Karl Popper standard, it will have to be stated in a manner, because when the media and all talk about all this, they don't talk about it in a very specific manner. It will have to be stated in a manner which is very highly specific. And therefore, that will be, it has to be falsifiable. Like I say here, for instance, okay. So if I have like this one, okay, so this is you notice this is a very, even if I make this as a prediction, okay, that I say that the sun can never rise before 6:30 a.m. in Delhi. If I can make this as a prediction, okay. Now that's my theory. My theory of the sunrise is the sun cannot rise before 6:30 a.m. in Delhi any time. Now forget about today. Now that is a false. That's a scientific statement. Okay, that may be true. Just like positive and normative. If you remember, we did say that a positive statement doesn't have to be correct. Okay, look at this. A moon is made of green cheese. This is a positive statement. It doesn't have to be correct. Okay, and even if this statement is a positive statement, my statement here is a positive statement. It is warm in here. Okay, it is not really very specific, but it is still a positive statement because I'm describing the state of affairs in this room. Okay, it is warm in here. It is still in the nature of a positive statement. It's not a normative. It's a positive statement in the sense that it's not a normative statement. I'm not saying that this room should have been warmer or this room should have been cooler. I'm just describing the state of affairs. So here, what we mean by scientific is that we are talking about a much more specific standard for any statement that is to be considered scientific. So if you apply the Karl Popper standard, the moment somebody makes any kind of statement, okay, like global warming or whatever it is, okay, I don't know much about the science, so I don't want to say too much because my physics chemistry is not good, okay, but I do understand this standard, okay, which means whatever you say to me,
Sir,
yeah, yeah,
sir, also science is something which is, if it is not questionable and falsifiable, it is not at all, uh, you know, science.
at all. Yeah, sorry, Sheena, go ahead. If it is not falsifiable or questionable, it is not what? I didn't really understand. I couldn't get the last part of what you were saying.
Sorry, sir, I got muted. I'm sorry for that.
Yeah.
So I was saying that science if it is not falsifiable or questionable, then it cannot be called science. It's Shant was raising a point that we cannot question science, but it is all about error, trial and error.
Correct,
So
correct.
I guess
Yeah.
that is not the correct statement to be given.
Correct. You're right. So you're actually directly contradicting what Sushant was saying. But Sushant is also not wrong. I mean, I understand why he has that view, because that is what the media and everybody has told him, that you can't question the science. In the context of that kind of problem, where people are actually trying to.
Bruno.
1 minute. Okay. So the people are actually trying to, tell you that, okay, it's follow the science, this is the science. So the question that arises is, well, if you're telling me to follow the science, okay, what is the science? Okay, for instance, I make another statement. So what, Sushant, are you get a little bit clearer now about what we are trying to say? So I agreed with Sheena. I understand why you have that view. But actually, anything which is pretending to be science, it must be falsifiable and questionable. Like if I say the earth is flat. Now, the earth is flat is a statement about the shape of the earth, and it is falsifiable because I have made a very specific statement that the earth is flat. Now, anybody who can see the ships disappearing over the horizon immediately knows there's some problem with this theory, because then why are they disappearing over the horizon? Okay. So therefore, all these questions, therefore the point that Sheena is making in a general sense is that if you are making if it has to be a scientific statement, it must be capable of being challenged and tested. Okay, this is what we are trying to say. All right. So if you understand, just wait for a little bit, Sushant. I'll ask you a little later if you're satisfied with the explanation. Once I explain what I'm saying, then maybe it will be clearer to you. So what Karl Popper did is he basically put a standard and said that in order for something to be considered as a scientific statement, okay, which means if your statement is not scientific, then really doesn't belong to the body of science. Okay, it has to be a statement like the earth is flat. It can be wrong, but it should be highly specific so as to be specifiable. Okay. Otherwise, it's not really science. It's just whatever you can call it, propaganda or whatever it is. You're just subjective views. Okay. So now, if I say that smoking causes cancer, now it has to be stated in a much more specific way so that we can actually conduct experiments and prove that everybody who smokes, it has to be stated in a particular way that if you smoke at least 4 cigarettes a day for 5 years, then you are definitely going to get cancer within the next 3 years. Understand what I'm saying? That it has to be very, all of you guys, please, there's so many students, it's difficult for me to check everybody. Please make sure that you're on mute, and please try to make sure you are switched on your videos, because sir has already made it clear that everyone's video should be switched on. Okay. So this is basically, what was I saying here? So we get lost whenever we go into other areas. Okay. Yeah. So a scientific statement has to be falsifiable. So I was talking about cigarette smoking causes cancer. Now, the point is to understand, to explain to Sushant and everybody else a little better. Now, this is not a scientific statement actually, because it's too vague. What do you mean by cigarette smoking causes cancer? You have to make it much more specific. Like everyone who smokes at least 10 cigarettes a day for 3 years is bound to get cancer in the next 3 years. Now that is a scientific statement, because now I can catch hold of all those guys who are smoking at least 10 cigarettes, observe them for 3 years, and then see that they are actually, then follow their lives and make sure that, not make sure, but test whether they're actually getting cancer after 3 years or not. So test them regularly. Okay, so this is what I mean by a statement has to be just, it cannot be that vague. It has to be highly specific so it becomes testable. Okay, and by testing it, you can falsify the statement. And once again, it doesn't have to be correct. Okay, it is just something with
The other example which can be taken here is that water boils at 100 degrees Celsius.
Correct.
That can be true for people staying in, Delhi or somewhere which is a warmer place. But in Siachen, where the degree is minus 50, the people living there will never agree to this statement that it actually boils at 100 degrees Celsius.
Yeah,
So this is a correct example of, a scientific statement.
Yeah, but actually it's at sea level. That statement is actually at sea level. The scientific statement will be at sea level. It will not have the same thing outside sea level, above sea level. But anyway, The point is, I understand what you're saying. So we understand what Shena is saying. Now this is at sea level, okay? Not levels, but at sea level, okay? Water boils. And now, if suppose somebody wants to dispute this, okay, they can dispute it but they will not be able to falsify it. But the point is not that it is true. The point is that it is a very specific statement. It is about water. It is about boiling. We know what boiling is. It's very specific, and therefore we have given the temperature as 100 Celsius. If I say that, if you apply some heat, the water will boil. Now that's not a scientific statement, because what is some heat? Now you put a temperature on it, it becomes highly, not sea level, but sea level. Although there are seals in the sea, obviously, but it has to be sea level. Okay. So the point here is that scientific, in order for a statement to be qualified to be accepted as scientific, okay, so nobody has the right to just throw around, whatever I'm saying is scientific. Your statement must be falsifiable, which means it has two properties. So it is highly specific, so specific that it is capable of being proved to be false, okay? Like water boils at 100 Celsius at sea level, then the earth is flat. Okay, that's a scientific statement because it is highly specific, and it is so specific that it's capable of being proved false. And there is another property, which is, it is a positive statement. It is never about, okay, if I make a statement like drinking alcohol is immoral, that's not a scientific way. You can never prove that I'm wrong. I will say, no, according to me, it's immoral. Even if the whole world says, no, it's moral, I'll say, no, according to me, it's immoral, because morality is subjective. So drinking alcohol is immoral. This is not a scientific statement, because you can never prove me false. Okay, but so so here you see the second property of a scientific statement is it's a positive statement. It's about something that is. The earth is flat. Okay. So we got a couple of people raising their hands. Soumya. Okay, so let's go to Soumya. Yeah.
So shouldn't it be the case that because it is not so specific, that's why it is capable of being proven false? So let's say when we are talking about your example of sun did not rise before 6:30 a.m. in Delhi, the person might be making this statement. Let's say even a scientist is making this statement, and he's sitting in Pitampura. Sun by its very nature moves from west to east. So while placed on a map, did he actually go and see whether sun did not rise before 6:30 a.m. in the eastern corners of Delhi? So because it is not very specific and saying that, he has considered all the, places in Delhi and gone and checked it, that's why he is making the statement. So because it is not very specific, that is the reason it can be proven false.
No, I would not agree with that, actually. So this actually, when you want to test this statement, this in Delhi means this will be taken as we know the sun rises in the east. So this would be taken the easternmost boundary of Delhi. So you can take this as what is that terminus that we have there? Anand Vihar. Okay. So somewhere like that. So easternmost boundary, because we know the sun rises in the east, and we have to assume that if there is no tall structure obscuring your view and all that. So all that taken into account. So we will have a way of defining this. So I would actually not agree with what you said on that point, that in fact the statement has to be highly specific. Only then can you falsify it. Okay, because as I said, it is warm in here. This is not a scientific statement because it's not capable of being falsified. Even if you show the temperature here is only 8 Celsius, I'll say that, well, to me that's warm. How do you prove I'm wrong? You can never prove I'm wrong. Now, if you say that the temperature in this room is a minimum of 30 Celsius, now that's a scientific statement, because we can easily measure the temperature and see whether it is below 30 or not, or it is above. Your statement is correct and it's actually above 30 Celsius. So it actually has to be highly specific. A scientific statement must have two properties. It must be a statement about something that is, and it must be highly specific, so it's capable of being false, proved false.
So sir, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. Go ahead. So sir, in that case, so if it is the easternmost border and if it is all checked, then where does it stand the chance to be questioned?
No. In the sense, see, what I'm saying is, this statement, like, I have not checked. You can actually check on time and date in your unit 0. I gave you the links. Time and date will have a record of where you go to the Met Office website. Now, I just arbitrarily made this statement because this statement is either true or false. But the point is, we can figure out whether it's true or false because we can go to the Met Office. The Met Office will have a record of, so to answer your question, whether we have to go to Anand Vihar or not, The point is that we will go by the Met Office. See, Met Office will have a definition, will have a timing for sunrise. Every day they'll have a timing for sunrise and sunset. Okay, or you take the time and date website data. So there is a official timing of sunrise. Okay, so we will just refer to the official timing of sunrise. But if you see, this statement is so specific. But now, if you compare it to another statement, the sun rose pretty late today. Okay. Now, if I make another statement, the sun rose pretty late today. Now, this is not a scientific statement because what is pretty late? Okay, I can say that even 6:30 is pretty late. Okay, it's just a matter. So it's not clear because it's not specific. What is pretty late? This is like saying it's pretty warm in here. Okay. So therefore, this makes it non-specific. This is the problem. It makes it non-specific.
So we are saying that scientific statements should be devoid of any subjectivity, and the very characteristic that we can question them is something that makes them scientific, right?
Yeah. So as I said here, this scientific statement will have two properties. It will be a positive statement, and it will be a highly specific statement. That will make it so
We can't hear you.
it will be falsifiable. Okay, so it will be, therefore it is not a normative
So
set.
your voice is breaking.
Okay, 1 minute. Okay, is it clearer now? Is it clearer now?
No, sir.
Okay, 1 minute. Let me see what I can. Okay, is it clearer now? I think it's just because
Yes.
I start every session. I start with a fresh GeoFi device, and it's got 2 GB on it, so it should be able to. Yeah, it is giving me some kind of message that your connection is unstable. I don't know why it is because. Anyway, let me make sure that I also hook it up to the data cable, and so that it's the power doesn't conk out like it did the other day. All right. Okay. So let's keep our fingers crossed, and yeah, let's hope that nothing happens. So is it better now? Is the voice clearer now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So it's basically due to the connection. That's that the connection quality goes up and down. Okay, so yeah, so now you understand what I'm trying to say here.
Yes, sir. Got
Sun
it.
rose pretty late. This will not be a scientific statement because it's not specific enough. But this has become a scientific statement because you can easily go and check from the Met Office whether the statement is true or not. So you can falsify my statement. Falsifiable does not mean that the statement is false. It only means that it is capable of being proved false. So if I make another statement that Roger Federer is more than 6 feet tall, that is also a falsifiable statement because it is a statement about something that it is, and it's a very specific statement, and the statement is true. Okay, so you have to go and find him, measure his height, and you will find that he is actually more than 6 feet tall. But the point is that you don't have to do all this. You have to look at the nature of the statement and see whether is it capable of being proved false. Like this kind of statement, you cannot ever prove that it is false. Pretty late today. Because I will just play with the words pretty late and say that, well, even 5 o'clock is pretty late. So therefore, it has to be very specific. That's what I'm trying to say here. So this is an essential quality of a scientific statement, that it has to be highly specific, and so specific that it has to be capable of being proved false. Okay, so this, and therefore it also requires that it to be, you cannot have a normative statement, therefore it is a positive statement. Only positive statements are capable of being proved false. But we are giving a further caveat which is saying that all scientific statements, they have to be falsifiable. Okay, they are positive statements. Okay, because otherwise they would not be falsifiable. Because you cannot falsify a normative statement. Now, the other thing we are saying is, but however, all positive statements need not be scientific statements. Okay, because why? There could be some positive statements like this one. It is warm in here. It's a positive statement because it's a statement about what it is. Okay, it's a statement about what is. Okay, but it's not. It's in the sense it's not a normative statement. I'm not saying that it should be colder or it should be hotter. Okay. Or there's too much moisture in the room and all that. So the undesirable levels of moisture in the room. I'm not saying those things. I'm just saying it's warm in here. So it's a descriptive statement. So it is a positive statement. but it is not a scientific statement because it is not specific enough. So scientific statement have to have two, as a scientific statement has to have two qualities: positive plus highly specific, which makes it capable of being proved false, therefore falsifiable. Okay, is this clear? Now, therefore, what we are saying is this statement. Okay, you got to get used to these kind of statements. We'll come into that in contract law as well. All scientific statements, so it's like sets and subsets. Okay, so scientific statements are strict subsets of positive statements. Okay, all scientific statements are positive statements, but all positive statements need not be scientific statements. So we can write this again. I think it's important for you to have this. I don't want to confuse you with too much mathematics, but I want you to recall your set theory from your school days, and this is a useful concept. This is a useful branch of mathematics for business, set theory. So let me write this statement. Okay, all scientific statements. I'm forcing you to recall your set theory now. Scientific statements. So please excuse all this language writing. It's not. Let me just put everything into all caps. Just easier to see text. All right. Okay. So now we have. What am I saying? So scientific statements are, now I'm introducing a little bit of mathematics for you, strict subsets. Okay. Another name for strict subsets is proper subset. So forcing you to recall a little mathematics. You must not have a fear of mathematics, okay? So at least in a subject like finance, which I teach in the second year, it's not a very mathematical subject, but it requires some use of algebra. And more importantly, what is required is many students in India develop a fear of mathematics. Now that is not correct. You must not allow yourself to develop a fear of mathematics, okay? Because your attitude should be, I can conquer any subject. Okay, so this is very important. I know many students in India have a fear of mathematics, and I don't blame them for it, but you have to correct it now, because you can't go through life with a fear of mathematics. Okay, so scientific statements are strict, also known as proper subsets. These are strict subsets, okay, or proper subsets. So scientific statements are, so I want you to understand all these things, all these statements, okay? This will force you to think this is how we develop analytical thinking and critical thinking, analytical clarity, okay? So I'm forcing you to be clear. And the way, as you can see, it's good that people are asking questions. This is how you become clear. So Shashank had a question. He had a doubt, so he asked a question. Soumya had a doubt, she asked a question. This is what you have to do. So you have any doubt that you have to ask, because you have to understand it from your own point of view. Everybody's point of view is different. Soumya's way of looking at the world is different. Shashank's way of looking at the world is different. So they have to absorb what I'm saying, but it has to be kind of adjusted to their way of looking at the world. Otherwise, the learning is not complete. Okay, which is why I say, I think in the first class I told you, why do you come to class? I don't want to force anybody to come to class, but why should you come to class? Because it gives you the privilege of asking questions, and without asking questions, your knowledge is unlikely to be complete. Okay, because technically, if I'm loading the videos for the full session, you don't have to come to class technically, assuming there was no requirement of attendance. Okay, but you should still come to class, because otherwise you can't ask the questions. So I hope you understand that also. This is also an important thing, although it's not a technical point. Okay, so here, coming back to our point, so scientific statements are strict or proper subsets of, not all. Well, I have put all scientific statements into a subset. So into a subset. So scientific statements are a strict proper subset of positive statements. All positive statements I have put into a set, and all scientific statements I have put into a subset. Okay, so I'm saying scientific statements are a strict or proper subset of positive statements. What does this mean? So you have to remember what you understood by proper. So everybody, I think, understands the idea of elements in a set, right? So there is a set which contains elements, etc. Okay, so the elements in a set, and they comprise the set. So I'll just give you an important definition of strict or proper subset. Okay, if we say, what is the definition? Okay, so what is the proper subset? If, let's say, X is a okay, Y. Okay. Then Y contains all the elements of X plus at least one other element that is not a null set. Okay, so it's again in law itself, I'm getting you into all this mathematics. It's good because you understand what is meant by interdisciplinary learning, and set theory is one of the most important and very useful branches of mathematics in management. Okay, in critical thinking, set theory is very important. So at least this basic stuff in set theory, everybody must understand. Okay, so then if X is a strict subset of Y, then Y contains, so Y is the bigger one. Okay, so X is a smaller one, Y is the bigger one. Y contains all the elements of X. So in a set, there are elements. So like if I say, if I take this room number 103A and I call it a set, then all the students who are sitting in room number 103A, they are the elements of the set. Each student is an element of the set. And then I'll count the number of students and say that this set contains so many elements. Okay, this is what you mean by elements of a set. And these things, so nobody should get scared by the mathematical terminology, because this much mathematics everybody has to understand if you're going to be a business student. Okay. Then Y contains all the elements of X plus at least one other element which is not a null set. Okay, which is not a null set. What is a null set? A null set is an element with no, is a set with no elements. Okay, so a null set is a set with no elements, and a null set is an element of every set. Okay, so this is the way we define it. Null set has no elements, and every set. We have to write it this way. So this is a mathematical trick which is basically been put in because they are going to make use of this in more advanced set theory applications. They are going to make use of this property. That's why they have put it there. They have imagined something called a null set, which is an empty classroom. You can think of a null set as an empty classroom. Your 103A has many of your colleagues in there. Okay. But imagine now in some other classroom 202, there is nobody there. So that's a set which has no elements in it, and that's a null set. Okay. Now, null set is an element of every set. Okay. So therefore, when we imagine 103A, we imagine all the elements, all your fellow students in 103A. But there's one more element in 103A which we will imagine is a one room with nobody in it. So it's a null set. Okay. So therefore we say two things which are true, which is it's a null set has elements and no elements in it. And a null set is an element of every set. So every set you think of, you have to imagine that a null set is also an element of it. Okay, so these are some basic principles. Soumya, are you still asking a question, or the hand is just up? You have a new question, or?
No, sir, it's from the previous question. I'm sorry.
Fine, no problem. Okay. All right. So it's like an old hand. Like in English, we say you're an old hand. So it's like you're very experienced, then we say you're an old hand. Okay. So so we have gone through a little bit of set theory. Okay. Let us recap a little bit. We have defined what is a strict subset. I'm no longer going to say proper because it's just another term for it. A strict subset. If X is a strict subset of Y, it sounds very complicated, but once you understand it, it's very simple actually. It's not that big a deal. Okay. So if X is a strict subset of Y, you can see all this. I'm just going to give my throat a rest, okay? Because I have a tendency to shout. So the throat gets very tired. So you guys will read it, okay? You can read it. So in the meantime, I'll just take a sip of water. Now I put everything into one view so that you can see Now we try to understand the material that is in the white background. We can make this a little bit clearer here. Here I can put in the set of all. 1 minute. Let me just go to, yeah. I'll just copy this. In this case now it should not be R, it should be is, because I'm referring to a set now. Okay. The set of all, I put all the scientific statements in the world into one set, and I'm saying this is a strict or proper subset of the set of all positive statements. Okay. So now you understand why I made this, because so this is basically just a mathematical way of stating this as logical statement, which is all scientific statements have to be positive statements, but all positive statements need not be scientific. If you have a positive statement that is not sufficiently specific as to make it so as to make it falsifiable, then it will not be a scientific statement. Like it is warm in here. It's a positive statement, but it's not a scientific statement. This is not specific. Okay? So that's all we are saying. But we have gone through all this convoluted logic. Why? Because we want to confuse you, and by confusing your brain, we want you to think in more detailed ways. Okay, and this is how you develop rigorous analytical thinking. So we initially give you complicated statements which sound confusing, and then eventually, by steps, you understand that they are actually not confusing, and then you have gained certain analytical clarity. Okay, so you have also understood about strict subsets and proper subsets. Okay, so the reason we define it this way, one other element which is not a null set. Okay, so which means at least one other element which is not a null set, but the null set is always there, it doesn't have any elements. Okay, so at least one extra real element, a kind of a real element. Okay, so it's like if you have 103 and we create a smaller room within 103 and we put some students in that room, and then we'll say that that room, the smaller room, is basically a subset of the strict subset of 103A, because there are some other students in 103A who are not in that smaller room. Okay, so that's basically it. Okay, so is all this stuff we discussed, is it clear to everybody? Any questions at this stage? I may have created some confusion with set theory, but as I said, in management, you have to be very comfortable. Another thing you notice we are doing is we are jumping from subject to subject. We are going from kind of like law or philosophy to logic and then to mathematics. So this is also something that as a management student, you have to be comfortable with. Okay, it should not scare you. Yes, Sheena?
Sir, a generalized question. What do you want us to study from the same notes you're providing us, or do we need to study something extra?
No.
I mean, we don't have any specific book for this, right?
No. There is no specific book. Okay, you just follow your duty is. It's a good question. It's an important question because you need to be clear about that. So you just have to follow your syllabus is always going to be the things that I discussed in the class. That's all. So usually the things that I'll give you, like here, for instance, I have for positive normative. This you should read because I have given you a hyperlink. So I expect you to read the hyperlink. You have to read the whole page. Okay. So this is part of your reading because it is hyperlinked in my reading. Okay. And this
Right,
is
sir.
also a hyperlink, so you have to read it. Okay. But otherwise, your syllabus is always going to be the stuff that I cover in the class. That's your syllabus. Okay. So and everything that I cover in the class, there will be some kind of quite a detailed log like these notes that I'm making, right? And then if you have questions, so another thing that you guys have to do as students, as your duty, is that if you are going through these notes and you find that something is not clear, then you have to tell me that, or you find that this color is not, it's too bright or whatever, something is bothering you, any issue you have with the notes, you have to inform me, because otherwise I will not know that it's causing a problem. Okay. So if you read the statement, you might find, oh, this thing is not very clear. Then I might rewrite it to make it clearer. So you have to give me feedback that, okay, this is, it's not working for me, okay? So then I will make some changes, okay? Is this clear? Does that answer your question, Sheena?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, welcome. So this is the idea. So I presume here that everybody is clear about this null set and elements, etc. Okay. So now here is, I was giving in the other class, I was giving the example of Galileo. So Galileo was actually sort of persecuted by the church because he had the view that, the earth revolves around the sun. In those days, people believed that the sun revolves around the earth. So because Galileo was giving this heretical view,
And is this the scientist Galileo Galilei?
correct,
That one?
yeah, Galileo Galilei, yeah. Okay, so this is the guy who dropped the feather and the stone from the Eiffel Tower.
Right, sir.
From the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Okay, yeah, so that guy Galilei, he was almost killed actually because they threatened him. They told him to say that the earth does not revolve around the sun. If you don't say it, we'll kill you. So he said it, but under his breath, kind of like Ashwatthama, he said, in spite of that, he was very adamant. He said, under his breath, he said, but it does. But they didn't hear him. So he managed to live. But this is the story of Galileo, which is useful to know because here you see conjecture and refutation. So Galileo makes a conjecture that the earth revolves around the sun. Now that's a very specific statement. And it contradicts the general theory at that accepted theory at that time that the sun revolves around the earth. So you can test it and prove it wrong. You don't have to have the technology to be able to do it at that point of time. But the point is the statement is such that it is capable of being falsified. You will assume that you have the technology to test it. Okay, you will not worry about the lack of technology. So I just want to go back to Sushant. Sushant, I have spent a lot of time discussing response to your question. Are you satisfied now? Is it a little clearer to you?
Yes, sir. I got it.
Okay, good. Okay, so now we'll try to quickly go through certain other related points. Okay, so normative versus positive, and then we went into this very important discussion about science. You need to understand this because these days lots of people are throwing around follow the science. Okay, if I want you to do something for you, if I want you to do something for me, I'll say follow the science and do it. So it's become like that. So it's very important to know what actually science is. Okay, so don't let anybody get away with making non-specific statements and claiming that they are science. Okay, so descriptive versus prescriptive is another distinction which is very similar to normative versus positive. Now I will later on, I will arrange them to be in such a way that the normative equivalent is always on the left, because here what I've put is I have put normative versus positive. Here I put normative first. So when I'm talking about other similar distinctions, the one which is similar to normative should be written first. But I have not followed that rule actually, so I'll have to correct that later. But in a way, it's good that I keep it this way because I want you to play this game and always check that when you're reading the second distinction, is it the same as, is the first one normative or is it actually a equivalent of the positive? So here, descriptive is similar to positive. Okay, you can read the links once again. Okay, there is link. There are the link here. So descriptive and prescriptive, there's not much. Once you have understood the point, you don't have to memorize. Let me emphasize once again, although I expect you to read the hyperlinks, you're not expected to memorize anything. And I will never penalize you for wrong English in the exam, okay? Because I'm not testing your written English. I will only expect that you don't memorize things and you write it in your own way. If the English is wrong, that's fine, I'll correct it, but I won't penalize you for it. I just want you to understand it and express it in your own language, because that way you will be training yourself in the right way. Okay, that's how we want to train our students. It will take time to get better, but that's okay. But if you don't practice in the right way, if you just keep mugging stuff up, then you're not even trying to get better, okay, in the way that you should be better. So descriptive is basically similar to positive, okay, because it describes something. And prescriptive is similar to normative, okay, because Obviously, you remember prescription from the doctor. Doctor is not describing what you took yesterday. Doctor is telling you that you have to take these tablets. Okay, so he's saying you should take these tablets. So that's why we say prescription. Okay, so anything which just tells you which is in the of a normative nature is called prescriptive. Okay, another distinction. And these distinctions are going to be, these are all adding to your vocabulary. These are all important. It's part of your overall communication skills and the content of what you communicate. So it will enrich your debates and your discussions. Okay. So another one is subjective versus objective. Okay. That is, here you can understand what is subjective. Subjective is anything which is, like if we go back to the example of temperature, okay, it is warm in here. Okay. This is subjective because what is warm? I'll say that, even 16 Celsius is warm. Somebody else will say, no, even 30 Celsius is not really warm. So it is subjective because the word is being interpreted by different people in different ways. So we say that this word is of a subjective nature. Okay, but 6:30 a.m. in Delhi, this is objective because if I say everybody report here, or we say that something will happen, some global event is going to happen at 6:30 a.m. in Delhi. So the guy from Seattle who is tuning in, he will figure out the time in Delhi and he will tune in at 6:30. The guy who's tuning in from Tokyo will also tune in at the right time because for whether you're in Seattle or in Tokyo, whatever your mother tongue is, 6:30 a.m. in Delhi has the same meaning for everyone in the world. Okay, but that is not true of the word warm. Okay, so this is objective and this is subjective. Okay, now why is this one of the reasons in which it is important, one of the ways it is in which it is important is it has a direct bearing on business law. Okay, which is in contract law, there is a question of, there may be a dispute about the terms of a contract. Okay, so there is, let's say we have come up with a contract where I am supposed to pay a certain amount of money every month to Ashi, and she's supposed to do some work on, whatever, my cleaning up the garden or cleaning up a swimming pool or something like that. Okay, so in that case, there's a dispute about the contract. Okay, and then so people say that, okay, like maybe there's a dispute, she did not do what she was supposed to do, so I did not pay her. And now when it comes to the court, and the court has to interpret the terms of the contract. Okay, now the court will apply what we call it in contract law, we have this idea of a reasonable man standard. Now this is an objective standard. Okay, what it means is that when the court looks at the contract that Ashi and I entered into, the court will not think about what Ram meant or what Ashi meant. They will think about, the way they'll think about it is, okay, this is the language. Now how would a reasonable person, a reasonable third party, when they read this kind of language, what would they think? What does it mean? Okay, how would they interpret it? So this is how the so-called reasonable man standard in contract law, which is actually an objective standard, and it is not a subjective standard, because if they were to go into what did Ashi mean by that term, what did Ram mean by that term, that would be a subjective standard. Okay. And so it's not subjective, it's actually objective. Under contract law, we have this thing called a reasonable man standard. So we use objective criteria, not subjective, to determine the terms, the meaning of terms of contracts. Okay, so it's a direct connection to business law, subjective versus objective. Once again, subjective is similar to normative, and objective is similar to positive, because it is as you can see from that example, 6:30 a.m. in Delhi. Okay, it's not really exactly the same as positive, but it is kind of more similar to positive than normative. Okay, so these are all similar distinctions. They are not the same distinction. Okay, so this doesn't mean the same as normative versus positive, but it has a similar feel to it, which is why I'm discussing these. You will see there are, I think, 9 or 11 ideas. 11 ideas we're discussing, 11 distinctions, and they're all connected. Okay, you will agree. I think if you don't agree, you can always, raise a point that, I don't agree with this, like many of your students have done. So that is actually very good, because I don't expect, I'm not, saying that you can't disagree with me. So if you have a point, you should make that point. And that is how we get good development of the notes also, actually, the topics we cover. Okay, so you saw yesterday, because of Soumya's question, I added some elements about the that principle in constitutional law about the principle doctrine of repugnancy and all that. They were not there in the notes previously, but because she asked the question, then we added those elements to the notes in the discussion. Okay, subjective versus objective. Okay, now there is another thing which is quite similar to subjective versus objective. Let me just go here and try to cook up that chart and say this is also a very important distinction in finance. Although many of you may not actually opt for finance, but you still have to understand this, because as I said, as a business student, you have to have a comprehensive understanding of many areas of business. So you should not shy away from a subject like finance or a subject like maybe operations, because as a business student, you are expected to be comfortable with many areas of business. Okay, so here we have one of the charting applications, very good charting application. Those who are interested in charting stocks and stuff like that, you can do Indian stocks on this and all kinds of stuff. This trading view, it's you can set up a free account and you can have your preferences and all that. So here's a chart of the you can set up. You can get Indian stock charts as well on this. Here's a chart of the West Texas Intermediate oil price. As you know, there's a problem in Texas right now with the freeze and all that. And there are all kinds of other problems with US oil production. Generally, supply is going down. So there's a big jump in the oil price. So, but if we talk about what is the oil price, this is actually WTI stands for West Texas Intermediate. It's a grade of crude oil. This is the North American benchmark for crude oil trading. Okay, so all North American crude oil is priced with reference to this. Okay, kind of many of you will know in the local commodity trade, there may be like suppose there's some kind of apple which is being priced. Now, if the Kashmiri apple is the benchmark, then other apples, Himachali apples, might be priced as a plus minus to Kashmiri apple prices. So that kind of pricing. So this is a benchmark basically. All right. So now, what is the West WTI price right now? It is 58.93. Now, this price is objective. So if I ask all the students in the class, once they have been taught how to find out the price will always be objective. So if I ask them what is the current price of WTI, everybody will have the same answer. Okay, 58.93. All right. Now we come to another term which is often used in finance, which is fair value. Okay, let me put this in brackets because normally people don't mention fair. Okay, they talk about value. All right, but actually what they mean is fair value. Fair means correct, justified, etc. Okay, this is the sense in which it is used. Now, this is a subjective matter. Why? Because when you listen to, I've told you guys to listen to all these business discussions, and you should be comfortable listening to stock market discussions. Sometimes people will say the stock market is overvalued. Now, you look at this. The first letter is not getting registered. Okay, some reason. All right. Okay, so you look at this Nifty chart. Now this is the COVID drop. Okay, then it has shot up. Look at 5 years. Okay, this is your COVID drop. Now it has shot up. Now people might say that this Nifty is, so there are two things here. The positive statement or the objective figure is what is the level of the Nifty now? That you read from here. Everybody will have the same answer. Okay, but if I ask them, what is the fair value? Do you think this is excessive now? Do you think the market price is excessive? The market has gone up too much. It is expecting too much of an economic recovery. Maybe the market should not have gone up so much. Maybe the fair value of the Nifty is maybe 10,000. Maybe it should be somewhere here. It has gone up too much. Okay, it is overvalued. You might hear these statements on the TV. Okay. Now, those kind of statements, if I ask everybody in the class, what is the fair value of the Nifty? So which means where should the Nifty be according to you, if the market was correctly factoring in all the supply demand and all the future economic uncertainty? Now that's that question will have a subjective answer. Some people will say 12,000, some will say 14,000, some will say 16, some will say 8,000. It's all over the place. Now, because fair value, you will see these discussions, a very important thing to understand even for business students who will not take up finance. Fair value, or sometimes just refer price versus value. Price is always objective. Value is subjective because different people have different estimates of fair value for any given asset. Okay, so this is another distinction that we want to be clear about. Okay, Another similar distinction, so this obviously is more like positive, this is more like normative. Okay, so here we have another distinction, which is morality versus legality. Okay, morality or ethics, ethical nature of something. Okay, I'll just say morality. Morality versus legality. Okay, so for instance, I might say that drinking alcohol is immoral, but drinking alcohol is actually not illegal in most countries. Okay, unless you're in Dubai or somewhere like that, or Saudi Arabia or places like that. It's not illegal in most countries. So I may have my view about morality, etc. I might think it's immoral, but in most countries, it's actually legal. So you have to make a distinction between the two. And again, as you can see, morality is a normative thing. Okay, it's very similar to normative, and it is very similar to being subjective, because my morality says drinking alcohol is illegal, is immoral. Somebody else might have a different view. It's their morality. So it's subjective. Morality varies between people. So it is subjective. And legality is much clearer. Okay. If, whatever, like say, if theft is a crime, then it is a crime. Okay. Whether you agree with it or whether you don't agree with it, and everybody else will agree that theft is a crime, or in which section of the IPC is theft described, that's also well, that's not about legality. That's a positive question or an objective question. But the point is that theft is made illegal, so therefore that relates to the legality of the. Some people might say theft is not immoral. You will see this with Marxist people. Many Marxist people will say this, that theft is not illegal because if I am very poor, and so they will say, sorry, they will not say theft is not illegal. They will say that theft is not immoral. Okay, they'll say that theft is not immoral because if I'm very poor and somebody else has a lot of money, I have the right to steal from him because I am very poor or I am going hungry. I need to feed my family. So if there is a requirement like this, I should have the right to steal somebody's property because I need it. Okay, so this is a Marxist argument that many people make on the Marxist side. So, but that may be their view of what is moral or immoral. That is, they're saying that theft is not immoral, but theft is illegal in most countries. So you have to understand the distinction. Okay. So I've given another example. We are not going to spend too much time on it because now the Supreme Court has already ruled on this and said that this basically can't be enforced because it's an unfair standard. But essentially what was happening is, so here I've said one more thing similar to what was the statement we made where we discussed set theory is the other time further up? Yeah, scientific statements and positive statements. Now, in the discussion of the law, you will encounter these kinds of statements very often. Okay. Now, the set of all immoral acts is likely to have more elements in it. Now you already know set theory, so you can understand this. That generally what happens is if you consider all the acts that people consider immoral, there are likely to be many more of those acts than the number of acts which are actually made illegal by the law. Okay, so that's all we are saying here, essentially. That, for instance, many things are immoral, but not all of those things are illegal. Like say alcohol, for instance. Many people have the view that alcohol consumption is immoral. So, but in most countries it is legal. Okay, so therefore you'll find that the set of immoral acts, although morality is subjective, okay, if you pretty much take anybody's view about something being immoral as valid and you add it to the set of immoral acts, you will have many more elements than the set of all illegal acts. Okay, but what you will find is that most of the things that are illegal, made illegal by societies, they are also immoral. Okay, so basically you can almost say that illegal acts are subset, but actually here the problem is it is much more difficult to, we don't want to make that kind of statement because immoral acts are more difficult to define because immoral itself is subjective. All right. So I have a little bit of a disturbance here, just put up with it. Okay, so this 497 of the IPC was a case where it dealt with adultery, okay, and the Supreme Court has shot it down. But before that, what the case was, the situation was, the law was such that if a man had an affair, okay, if a married man had an affair, his mistress would not be punished, would not be held liable in any way. But if a married woman had an affair, then her lover would be charged with adultery. Okay, so this was obviously unbalanced and unfair standard, and it was challenged in the courts in 1985, but it did not succeed. But eventually now the Supreme Court has said that no, you can't apply this kind of a imbalanced standard. Okay, but this is what it was there. So here was an example where what I was saying is what is moral versus illegal. So obviously most people would agree that even the man's act of adultery is actually immoral. But as it happened until very recently in India, it was not considered illegal. Okay, although obviously most people would consider it immoral. Okay? So that's what we mean by difference between morality and legality. Okay, so I'm moving a little quickly, but anybody has any questions at this stage? I just want to make sure that everybody is very comfortable asking questions. Okay, there is no. I may sometimes go quickly because I want to cover some material, but you should always feel free to ask questions. Okay. All right. Now we'll move to some very important distinctions. Okay, which is positivism, legal positivism, formalism on one side, and these two on the other side. Okay. Very important distinction. So here we'll start with formalism. Okay, so we'll start with positivism actually. The positivism is a movement which was associated with this guy called John Austin, who basically what we say in positivism is that whether or not a law is valid, you can read it here. Just I'll rest my throat a little bit, and you guys can read. In the classroom at the back, can you read the font size? Is it clear? You just raise your hand if you can read the font size. In the classroom, the last bench. Are you able to read? Can you raise your hand if you are able to read? Okay, great. Excellent, excellent. Okay. Because I've played with the font size a little bit, so I can actually make it even a little bit bigger. Yeah, so just try to read the stuff. Okay. So what John Austin said essentially was this, that when you're talking about the validity of a law, okay, it depends on certain socio-political facts, and it does not depend on the moral merit of that law. Okay, and by socio-political facts, he was talking about the established constitutional procedure for making laws. So essentially what John Austin, if he were alive today, what he would say is, let's say take the modern debate, very recent debate about the CAA legislation, okay? That now what many people who are opposed to it are saying that this is, essentially what they're saying is this law is not moral, okay? Because it discriminates and all that. It is not moral. They're criticizing the moral element of the, they say, yeah, okay. But what John Austin would say is that look, this you may have a view that it's immoral, but the law is valid because it has been followed. It's not like Mr. Modi woke up in the morning and said, okay, nice cup of tea, let's do this now. Okay, it went through Parliament, it went through the procedures for making law, it was ratified by it was signed by the President, and even notified. So it has followed the established constitutional procedure for making laws. So it is a valid law, okay? And therefore, you cannot determine the validity of a law based on the moral merit of that law according to you, okay? So therefore, again, Austin was arguing for a kind of an objective standard for assessing validity because it's based on whether you followed the constitutional procedure, okay? And not basically on a subjective standard like the morality. Even in the case of the Farm Bill, if you see the farm laws, again, many people have disagreements with it and all that, but it's not like they woke up in the morning and just decided to do it. They followed a procedure, okay, and even the court has actually said that you did not have enough consultation, but that actually they did follow the procedure. It's not that they didn't follow the constitutional procedure. Now, what is enough consultation? That is a subjective matter. Yes, Sushant?
Sir, I wanted to know when we are saying that in legal positivism, the one particular law goes to a legislative process.
Yeah,
then even in the legislative process, the objective criteria has been discussed, right? And if it is not discussed, there's always a scope of challenging it in front of judiciary, like we have seen it with Citizenship Amendment Act.
correct. Yeah, yeah.
So,
So
like, what
what?
is the basis of this theory, of this thesis?
No, I didn't understand what your question was actually. You understood what positivism is, right? What Austin? Okay, maybe once again, just wait. Let me just explain a little bit more. Then maybe you'll understand. Okay. Now,
Okay, sir.
why did John Austin have to say this? Okay, it seems kind of obvious. Okay, the reason I had to say it because this is happening in the early 19th century, because at that time actually this movement is a reaction to this. There was a prevailing view, just like in the days of Galileo. People thought that the sun revolves around the earth. Okay, so Galileo had to come and say, no, I think you got it wrong. So this guy, John Austin, in his time, there was the theory that this natural law, which is basically saying that the authority of a legal standard, it comes from at least partly from the moral merit of the standard. So if I think this law is not moral, which means essentially, let's say if you take CAA or you take the farm laws, if I feel that these laws are not moral, then I don't have to follow them. According to me, these are not valid laws. Okay, so that was the kind of thinking that was prevalent in those days. But John Austin said that no, we can't afford to have this kind of a standard for what is a valid law. We need to have an objective standard because this natural law legal theory standard is a subjective standard. So what John Austin said as part of the movement of legal positivism, which is that the validity of the law should be based on whether or not a certain procedure has been followed. So based on these socio-political facts, okay. So whether the parliament followed the procedure, okay, for in certain cases, certain acts, like I remember from West Bengal once there was a challenge about I think a state law or something like that, where one of the parts of the procedure was not followed, or about a central law, president had not given his signature to it. Okay, so therefore now that's a valid criticism even from a John Austin kind of point of view, because there you are pointing out that a particular procedure was not followed. But otherwise, Austin is saying if the procedure has been followed, constitutional procedure, then it's a valid law. Whether or not you think it's moral is not really relevant for the validity of the law. Okay, so does this? So he had to do this because at that time there was confusion about these ideas. It is happening around this time, early 19th century, early 19th century. So therefore, guys like Austin had to come in and clarify matters for everybody. That saying that you better apply only an objective standard to assess the validity of the law. Otherwise, you are going to have a lot of problems in society because some people will follow the law and some people will not follow the law. You can't have that. So you must have an objective standard. Okay. Is this a little clearer for you now, Sushant?
Like I got the idea of this thesis, but
Yeah.
my question is like if we talk about a democratic country like India,
Yeah.
that when a bill is introduced in our parliament, so
Yeah.
once it's going through the legislative process,
Yeah.
uh, we also discuss the objective criteria about it, right? And in case the objective criteria is not discussed, and someone feels it is unconstitutional, so there's always a possibility of, or it is unfair, so that particular person can always go to the judiciary.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. So your question is, yeah, you're right about that. They can go to the judiciary and challenge the law. Yes.
so yes, in that particular scenario, what would be the relevance of this thesis?
Okay, so the relevance of this thesis would be that even in that there would be some relevance because if the judges believe in this theory of legal positivism, okay, they would just look at whether Parliament followed the actual proper procedure, okay, and they would not admit any kind of questioning of the law based on moral arguments, okay. So basically, they would say that okay, look, this law has followed all the procedures, okay, like they would say in the case of, and there are all kinds of judicial standards also. If you look at CAA, there are all kinds of standards like in how the government is allowed in our constitutional law. There are certain standards which have been established. So the court would say that according to our jurisprudence and according to the procedures required, everything was followed. Okay, so there is nothing wrong, we cannot fault the government on any kind of procedural ground. But of course, it is a policy related matter. So all policy is subjective and normative. So in this case, what will happen is that when the court is adjudicating an appeal like that on the CAA, so like somebody like Harish Salve, I have not followed with what the final decision was, but it was obviously challenged. But Harish Salve, I remember mentioning that this law is going to pass, and actually I saw the argument. It is a correct argument that it's you can't really challenge the constitutionality of it. But of course, you can say that policy is not correct. Of course, you can say that. If I say that should the Jats be given reservation, then if I have a policy that does not give them reservation, somebody can say, no, this policy is wrong, but they should have been given reservation. Now, you can always say that, but whether the policy followed the procedural matters, now that would be a legal positivist argument. So even in that debate, there would be a validity, there would be a relevance for this doctrine, because the court would look at it and say that all the procedures were followed. Now you can have a policy disagreement, but that does not mean that this law is unconstitutional. Okay, you get my point. Sushant, is it a little better now?
Right, sir, got it. And sir, one more follow-up question on this.
Yeah.
Like in the recent farm bills, we have seen that the parliament has passed the bill with a voice note. So as according to this thesis, will it be called, will we consider that the constitutional procedure was not followed?
No, but the question is voice vote allowed or not? Is it something illegal? It's not illegal.
But it's not illegal, but when there is no consent in the parliament, as per my knowledge, we cannot pass it from a voice note in that scenario, right?
No. But the question is the voice vote a procedural? Is it now? You may agree. I would agree that you can say that voice vote means there's not enough discussion. Okay, you can say that. But my point is, if I take a positivist view on this, okay, or as I'll explain later, legal formalist view on this, okay, my point is the voice vote illegal? Does our constitutional procedure allow for the voice vote? That is my question. What do you think? Does it allow for the voice vote?
So when the bill is only of a formality kind of a thing, when the discussion is not required to be made, then it is allowed, I think.
Yeah, so it is a question of whether the decision to use the voice vote was a valid decision. Okay, the court can go into that. But the general thinking that I'm trying to bring into this discussion is that, did they do anything illegal? That would be the question. If you take a positivist view of the whole controversy, okay, the Supreme Court made a point about you did not have enough discussion and all that. But the point is, does the law, the question that we should be asking is, as from a positivist point of view or a formalist point of view, okay, the question we should be asking is whether all the required procedures were followed and whether the discretion is given to the parliament to have a voice vote, okay, and whether that discretion was abused or not. The court can go into that. But the general drift of what I'm saying is that as long as the procedural requirements were met and nothing illegal was done, it's not like Mr. Modi woke up in the morning, had a cup of tea and said, okay, let's do this. Okay. So it was following, if procedures were followed, then you can't, because then somebody or the other will always have a disagreement on a policy matter. Okay. I disagree with the tax laws. I think the tax laws are too complex. I think the tax rate is too high. The country is not getting investment. But so what? I mean, that is the policy that is made by the elected parliament. They have decided the tax rate should be where it is, not 15%. Ram Sen says it should be 15%, but they don't agree. So now Ram Sen is not elected. No, they have been elected. So they have made the policy. They have the right to make the policy. If you disagree with the policy, you should form a party, low tax rate party, and then campaign on it and then get elected. So this is how it should be done. So you cannot. That's how I would bring the positivist view of the whole debate. Now you have to see whether it is anything illegal or not. It may be undesirable. That's fine. I have been given the discretion, and I have used my discretion as whatever speaker or whatever. I have used my discretion. If the law has given me discretion, and I have used the discretion, then it's really difficult to criticize. Actually, like for instance, police have discretion to file the cases. Okay, so now Sushant is accused of vandalizing Pranav's shop. Okay, but I like Sushant is a good buddy of mine, and I go there as a police officer and I say, oh, but yeah, I'm not going to charge Sushant. Okay, this is an extreme example. This is not a good example. But point is, if I have discretion given by the law, I will say, no, I will not charge Sushant. And it is within my discretion to decide who I'm going to charge and who I'm not going to charge. Okay, so you understand what I'm saying, Sushant?
Right, sir. Got it.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we'll continue with the discuss. So you can understand now what is meant by. I think you have now a good understanding of what is positivism, and that will help us to understand better the idea of formalism and textualism. I have essentially, in answering Sushant's question, I have already given you a very good feel of what is meant by formalism. In formalism, we say this, that does the law give the discretion? If the law gives the discretion to the president to do something, and the president exercises the discretion, then you might feel that it was not a good exercise of discretion, but that's your opinion. But it doesn't really matter because he has been given the discretion. That means we trust his discretion. The law has given him the discretion. We trust his discretion. So therefore, if you have a formalist view, you say here nothing illegal here. Okay, everything is fine because procedures were followed, laws were followed. So you can have a policy disagreement. You go and campaign on that different policy and get yourself elected. Okay, so that would what we say. So it's a legal formalism. Okay, what we say is this, that essentially we look at which is also sometimes one branch of that. This is a broad idea, formalism. In the US, we use this term called textualism. Okay, you can use it elsewhere as well. What we basically said, textualism is related to text. So whatever is in the body of the law, whatever is you follow the black letter law, which means whatever is written in the law. So for instance, if you go, well, let's assume that the Supreme Court has not yet ruled on 497. Okay, and let's assume they have not yet ruled on 497. Then what the court would say, if there was a case like this in 1985. Okay, now that was adjudicated upon in a very textualist and formalist way. The court looked at it and basically said that, yeah, I mean, you can say that it's not fair, but the law clearly says that there is no punishment essentially for the husband's mistress. In this section, if you look at it, we are not going to go into detail in it, but you can check it later. That in this is actually unbalanced because the husband's mistress is not held liable under this statute. So the textualist judge would look at this kind of a case and say, fine, if somebody is trying to, charge the husband's mistress under this law, the judge will say, look, I can understand your point about fairness and all, but this is not the law. The law is saying clearly that she is not to be held liable. So therefore, I can't do anything. I can't hold that person liable. Okay, so that would be an example of a formalist view, a black letter law. Just read what the law says and follow the law. So this is basically what is meant by this idea of the broad idea of formalism, within which you have the idea of textualism. Okay, which is text basically driven on the text. You look at the text of the law, follow the black letter law. Don't bring your subjective preferences into the mix. All right. So let me just see where we are. We have a couple of minutes. I'll just briefly give you a very good understanding of what is meant by legal formalism. So that you can then do some reading on this and enrich your understanding. The idea here is that the judges have to apply the law and not make the law. All right. So formalism here, we can have this and then talk about, one second, where is, I'm trying to find those, yeah, actually, this is where we are. This is what we are looking at. Maybe we won't have time today, but we'll try to. Yeah, we already got one of those. And yeah, look at this. You remember this point now? When this guy, the juvenile was supposed to be released, there was a hue and cry in the country. And nobody wanted him to be released. But the judge did not, the Supreme Court did not actually, you want to understand legal formalism, it was all there in one line. Okay. The Supreme Court declined to halt his release because what are they saying? This whole idea of legal formalism is here. We share your concerns. We are also outraged by it. But we have to go by the law as it stands today. Okay, that's what they said, which is basically a classic example of legal formalism, okay, where you read the law and you follow what the law says. You don't try to bring your personal subjective policy preferences into the mix. Okay, so this is an understanding of legal. This gives you an understanding of legal. You see here, any further detention requires a legislative sanction. Okay, that means the legislature has to change the law. Because right now the law says under the Juvenile Justice Act, he has to be released after 3 years. So therefore, we cannot do anything. We have to follow the law as it stands, even though we may be actually outraged and share your concern. Okay, so you see how it is a strict formalist view by these two justices. Okay, now you understand everything. This is a very good example of legal formalism. Okay, everybody was outraged, but the court has to follow the law. What this this is what legal formalism is. Okay, so it is related to positivism, as you can see. It's a very similar distinction. Now, these things are very important to understand as a law student. Okay, and I'm treating you as law students because these what we call jurisprudential philosophies. Okay, jurisprudential philosophy, they influence the judges in the way they make decisions. Sometimes the judges themselves, they don't know that they're being influenced by these philosophies, but pretty much everybody subscribes to one of these philosophies. Okay, so depending on what kind of person your judge is, you might get a different kind of decision. Okay, so it's important to be aware of these distinctions. And okay, what happened? I did not set the alarm today. I don't like to delay. I forgot to set the alarm. Okay, sorry guys, I detained you. So we'll stop here. I was just wondering why the alarm. I thought I set the alarm, but it didn't go off. Anyway, I actually forgot to set it. Okay, all right, folks, you're dismissed. Your class is dismissed, and you can leave. And if anybody has a question, they can stay back. Otherwise, the rest of you can leave. Yeah, Pawan. Pawan, you had a question. Okay, anybody has any question? So 103A, you folks can leave if you want. Okay, you don't have to, but you can. And anybody else has a question, you can ask me. Otherwise, we'll just stop the recording here. And
so,
yes,
can you please share the link of the drive with us?
Yeah, I thought I shared you. You're not shared into the drive? 1 minute.
I didn't get.
You didn't get? Okay, 1 minute. I'll add you right now.
And sir, can you tell us where can we see the recording?
Okay, yeah. So good question. Here, you can go. Okay, one more point I just make with you guys is that please, I noticed that I don't know who it was that signed up. Please tell your batchmates the website that I'll show let me answer Sushant's. I'll just stay there. I'll add you as well. Please look at this. Can you see the spreadsheet, Sushant, and everybody else? Yeah. Yes, I put the course playlist here. Okay. So click this. It opens the playlist. Okay. And please remember, please tell your batchmates there may be some confusion because actually earlier DG sir had asked us to stop uploading. He asked me to stop uploading. So therefore we had to stop, and then I had to, I wanted to store the video somewhere. I started to upload to a different channel, and then I have continued with that channel. So you can see, Sushant, can you see now?
Yes, sir.
You just go there and click. Okay, this file is there in your folder. Okay, I put the course playlist there. Okay, I haven't been able to put that. Since I put the playlist, you can just take the videos from there, the individual videos. Okay, and tonight's will go up. Now, one more point here, I want to make sure it's part of the recording. Please make sure that you're subscribing to this one, okay, because this is the live channel. The other one is dead, actually. So what I found was there's another one with _DSB. That one, actually, we had to shut down because in between, Pandit sir had told us to stop recording, and had told me to stop uploading. So therefore, I stopped, and therefore I needed to store the videos somewhere, and I was storing it here. So when I got the permission from him to start uploading again. Now there was a gap, and I didn't have time to go and fill the gap. So I have now migrated to this channel. So I noticed a lot of people subscribed recently to that other channel. So that is going to be a dead channel because I'm not uploading there. Okay, so I don't know whether it was your batchmate. So please make it clear to them that this is the one. Okay. And you find it by going through this. Okay, is this clear now, Sushant, and everybody else?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So please make sure that message goes out, because if they subscribe to the wrong channel, they won't get the updates, and it will create confusion. Okay, please make sure they're subscribing to the right channel, which is just the name without any underscore, etc. Okay, anybody else, any questions? Okay, so please remember, folks, I'm just repeating once again now, you have to be ready for you need to have your video switched on, because Director Sir had mentioned that, okay? So please remember that. We have to now, we have to make sure we do that from the next session. Okay, so I'll close the recording now. Is that okay? Are we done? Okay, should I close the recording? Any more questions, right? Okay, so we close the recording.